Have you ever felt the crushing weight of shame when someone strips away your dignity in front of the world? When your faith becomes a target for mockery and your poverty transforms into a weapon against you? This story dives deep into that raw humiliation, but carries within it a message of forgiveness and transformation so powerful it might forever change how you see those who hurt you. Sometimes the greatest miracles happen not through divine intervention, but through the stubborn persistence of love in the face of hatred. Girl clutches Bible in dim hallway. The rent notice had been taped to Miriam's door for 3 days now, its red letters bleeding into her dreams like wounds that wouldn't heal. At 19, she had already learned that dignity was a luxury she could barely afford, but faith was free, and no one could take it from her. She pressed the worn leather Bible against her chest, feeling the cross pendant cold against her collarbone, a gift from her grandmother before she left Moldova 2 years ago. The hallway stretched before her like a tunnel, peeling wallpaper and flickering fluorescent lights, creating shadows that danced with her anxiety. Viktor Petrov stood at the far end of that hallway, his 57-year-old frame blocking the meager light from the window. His grey sweater hung loose on shoulders that had once carried the weight of bigger dreams than collecting rent from immigrants who could barely speak English. He watched her approach with eyes that had forgotten how to see people as anything more than numbers in his ledger. The building housed 12 units, and Miriam in 3B was 2 weeks behind. In his hand, he held his master keys, jangling them with the practiced impatience of a man who had long ago decided that compassion was bad for business. "Miss Kozlov," he said, his voice echoing off the water-stained ceiling, "we need to discuss your situation." Miriam's English, though heavily accented, was clear. "Mr. Petrov, I have interview tomorrow. Restaurant on 5th Street. They need server. I get job, I pay everything." "Well, that's what you said last week about the cleaning position." Victor's arms crossed over his chest, creating a barrier more impenetrable than any locked door. "And the week before about the grocery store." The Bible in her arms felt heavier, as if it absorbed the weight of her shame. She had applied to 23 jobs in the past month, walked until her only pair of shoes had worn through at the heel, smiled until her face ached at interviews where they looked at her foreign features and heard her accent, and suddenly remembered the position had just been filled. "I try, Mr. Petrov. I try very hard. Trying doesn't pay rent." He noticed the Bible then, his lips curling into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Maybe you should spend less time reading fairy tales and more time looking for work." The words hung in the air between them like a slap that hadn't quite landed yet. Miriam's fingers tightened on the book's spine. This Bible had traveled 4,700 miles with her, across an ocean and half a continent. It had been her mother's and her grandmother's before that, its pages soft as tissue paper from decades of desperate prayers and grateful tears. "Is not fairy tale," she said quietly, "is faith." Victor laughed, the sound sharp as breaking glass. "Faith? Let me tell you about faith, little girl. Faith is what keeps people like you poor. Faith is what makes you accept your suffering instead of doing something about it. Faith is the reason you're standing here begging instead of—" "I not beg." The words erupted from her with a force that surprised them both. "I never beg. I work. I always work. Since I'm 14 in Moldova, I work. Clean houses, care for children, pick fruit until my hands bleed. I come here for better life, and I work more. But everywhere I go, they see this." She gestured to her face, her dark features that marked her as other, as foreign, as unwelcome. "They hear this." She touched her throat, where her accent lived like a permanent badge of displacement. "But still I try, because I have faith that tomorrow be better than today." Victor's expression hardened. "Tomorrow you'll be evicted if you don't have my money." The door to 3A opened, and Mrs. Chen peered out, her 90-year-old eyes taking in the scene with the wisdom of someone who had witnessed too many small cruelties to be surprised by them anymore. Other doors cracked open along the hallway. Mr. Thompson from 3C, the Ramirez family from 3D, an audience gathering for Miriam's humiliation. "Please," Victor said, his voice rising for the benefit of the watchers, "tell us all how your faith is going to pay your rent. Will your God send money from heaven? Will angels appear with cash? Or maybe," and here his voice turned cruel, "maybe you're waiting for a miracle, like all the other delusional immigrants who come here thinking the streets are paved with gold." Miriam felt tears burning behind her eyes, but refused to let them fall. Not here. Not for him. She had cried enough tears in the bathroom at 3 a.m, muffling her sobs with a towel so the neighbors wouldn't hear. She had cried while counting her last $12, calculating how many meals she could stretch them into. She had cried reading rejection emails on the library computer, each one a door closing in her face. But she would not cry for Victor Petrov. "You know what your problem is?" Victor continued, warming to his theme now that he had an audience. "You people come here with nothing, contribute nothing, and expect everything. You hide behind your religion because you're too lazy or too stupid to—" "Victor," Mrs. Chen's voice cut through his tirade. Enough. But he was beyond stopping now. Years of bitterness and disappointment pouring out like poison from a broken container. "No, they need to hear this. All of you need to hear this. This is America. We work for what we have. We don't sit around praying for handouts. We don't—" The sound that interrupted him wasn't dramatic, just a small thud as Miriam set her Bible down on the windowsill and reached into her pocket. She pulled out a folded envelope, worn soft from handling. Inside was $43, her food money for the next 2 weeks, her bus fare to job interviews, her last hope crumpled into small bills. "Here," she said, holding it out to him, "is not all, but is everything I have." Victor stared at the money like it might burn him. "That's not even a quarter of what you owe." "I know." Her voice was steady now, dignified in a way that made several neighbors shift uncomfortably. "But is all I have. Take it or leave it. Tomorrow, if you want to evict me, evict me. But today, I give you everything." He snatched the money from her hand, counting it with theatrical disgust. $43. Pathetic. He shoved it into his pocket. "You have 1 week. 1 week, or you're on the street. And your God won't save you then." As he turned to leave, Miriam called after him, "Mr. Petrov." He paused without turning around. "I pray for you tonight." The laugh that escaped him was ugly. "Save your prayers for someone who needs them, like yourself." After he left, the hallway slowly emptied. Mrs. Chen was the last to go, pressing something into Miriam's hand before disappearing into her apartment. It was a $20 bill and a note. "For food. Don't argue." Miriam stood alone in the hallway, in that grey liminal space between despair and hope, where most of life actually happens. She picked up her Bible and found her bookmark, a photograph of her family back in Moldova, all of them standing in front of their small house with its vegetable garden and chicken coop. They had sold everything to send her here, believing in a dream that seemed to mock her now with its impossibility. She opened to a random page, her eyes falling on words worn smooth by repetition. "Weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning." The morning felt very far away. That night, Victor Petrov sat in his apartment on the top floor, counting the day's collections. $412 from various tenants, each bill a small victory against the chaos that always seemed to be pressing in at the edges of his life. He had been a different man once, 20 years ago, when he'd bought this building with his wife, Elena. They were going to fix it up, make it beautiful, create affordable housing for immigrant families like they had once been. But Elena had died of cancer 15 years ago, taking with her his capacity for softness. The building had become a prison he couldn't afford to leave, and couldn't bear to maintain beyond the minimum required by law. Each peeling wall, each dripping faucet, each broken tile was a reminder of promises unkept and dreams dissolved. His phone rang. The doctor's office. Mr. Petrov, we have your test results. The doctor would like you to come in tomorrow to discuss them. The careful neutrality in the nurse's voice told him everything. You didn't need an appointment to discuss good news. What time? Can you do 9 in the morning? The same time as Miriam's job interview, he thought with bitter irony. Both of them racing toward their respective salvations or dooms. He hung up and walked to his window, looking down at the street below. From up here, people looked like ants, purposeful but ultimately insignificant. He had spent so many years up here, separated from life by height and bitterness, that he had forgotten what it felt like to be among them. On his desk was a stack of mail, mostly bills and advertisements, but at the bottom was an envelope with foreign stamps, addressed in careful handwriting. He had taken it from Miriam's mailbox that morning, planning to use it as evidence of her receiving money from home if she tried to claim total poverty. But he hadn't opened it yet. Now, with the taste of his own mortality fresh in his mouth, he tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper covered in Cyrillic script he couldn't read, and something else, a pressed flower, purple and delicate, wrapped in tissue paper. There was also a small note in English, obviously translated with great care. For my darling Miriam, this is lavender from grandmother's garden. She say to tell you she pray every day for you. She say to tell you that God see your struggles and your faith make her proud. We all proud. We love you more than words. Do not give up. Dawn always come after darkest night. Victor set the letter down with trembling hands. When was the last time anyone had written to him with such love? When was the last time anyone had been proud of him? He looked around his apartment, at the expensive furniture that brought no comfort, at the television that played to fill the silence, at the photographs he had turned face down because Elena's smile was too painful to see. He had everything Miriam lacked: money, security, citizenship, and nothing she possessed: faith, hope, family who loved her across oceans. The next morning arrived grey and drizzling, the kind of rain that seemed to seep through walls and into bones. Victor didn't sleep, spending the night alternating between staring at the ceiling and looking at that pressed flower, so carefully preserved and sent across the world. At 7, he heard Miriam's door open and her footsteps on the stairs. She was wearing her one good dress, he knew, the blue one she saved for interviews. He had seen her washing it by hand in the basement laundry room, hanging it carefully to dry, pressing it with an iron so old it barely worked. He followed her. She walked 47 blocks to save bus fare, her broken shoes filling with water, her hair pulling free from its careful arrangement in the rain. She held a folder against her chest, protecting her meager resume from the weather. Victor followed in his car, watching her pause under awnings to catch her breath, watching her practice her smile in store windows, watching her lips move in what he knew was prayer. The restaurant was small, family-owned, with steamed windows and the smell of coffee and bacon drifting out whenever the door opened. Miriam paused outside, straightening her dress, touching the cross at her throat. Then she went in. Victor parked and followed. Inside, he took a booth in the corner where he could watch without being seen. Miriam sat at a table with a middle-aged woman who was obviously the owner. He could see them talking, see Miriam's earnest expression, her hands gesturing as she explained her experience. The owner was nodding, smiling. Then the owner's husband came out of the kitchen, took one look at Miriam, and whispered something in his wife's ear. The woman's expression changed, became closed, professional. Victor had seen that look 1,000 times, the look of a door closing, of an opportunity evaporating, of hope dying in real time. He couldn't hear the words, but he didn't need to. Miriam's shoulders sagged just slightly. Her smile became fixed, brittle. She nodded, stood, shook hands, and left. The whole thing had taken less than 10 minutes. Outside, she stood in the rain for a long moment, just breathing. Then she began the long walk home. Victor's doctor's appointment was in 15 minutes. He should go. Whatever they had to tell him wouldn't change if he was late. But instead, he found himself following Miriam again, watching as she stopped at a church along the way. It was a small church, Baptist, with a sign outside advertising free lunch on Wednesdays and English classes on Saturday mornings. Miriam went inside. Victor hesitated, then followed. The sanctuary was nearly empty, just a few older women praying in the front pews and a janitor mopping the aisle. Miriam sat in the back row, her wet shoes squeaking on the floor. She didn't kneel, didn't open her Bible, just sat there, staring at the simple wooden cross at the front of the church. Victor sat several rows behind her, feeling like an intruder in this sacred space. He hadn't been in a church since Elena's funeral, and before that, not since his mother had dragged him to Orthodox services as a child in Russia. He had forgotten the particular quality of silence that existed in churches, different from any other quiet in the world. Then Miriam began to speak, so softly he had to strain to hear. "I don't understand," she said to the cross, to the silence, to whatever she believed was listening. "I try so hard. I do everything right. I don't lie, I don't steal, I don't complain. I just want to work. I just want to send money home to help my family. I just want to be worth the sacrifice they made to send me here." Her voice broke, and Victor saw her shoulders shaking. She was crying finally, where she thought no one could see. "My grandmother say you have plan for me. She say everything happen for reason. But what reason? What plan? To be humiliated, to fail, to be thrown on street like garbage?" She wiped her face with her hands. "I'm so tired. Not tired in body, I can work, I can always work. But tired in soul. Tired of being unwanted. Tired of being looked at like I'm nothing. Tired of trying to prove I deserve to exist." She fell silent for a long moment. Then, "But still I trust. Not because I understand, but because I choose. Because without faith, what do I have? Without hope, what am I? So I choose to believe that tomorrow will be better, that somewhere, somehow there is place for me, that my suffering has meaning, even if I cannot see it." She stood to leave and turned toward the aisle. That's when she saw Victor. For a moment they just stared at each other, both frozen in mutual mortification. Then Miriam's expression shifted through surprise, embarrassment, anger, and finally settled on something Victor couldn't quite identify. Pity? Compassion? "Mr. Petrov," she said quietly, "you follow me." He couldn't speak, couldn't explain why he was there, couldn't justify this invasion of her privacy. He just nodded. "Why?" The honest answer surprised him as it came out. "I don't know." She studied his face, and he realized she was seeing him, really seeing him, for the first time. Not as the cruel landlord, not as the enemy, but as what he was, a lonely, frightened, bitter old man who had followed her because he had nowhere else to go. "You look tired," she said finally. "You look sick." He almost laughed at the understatement. "I have a doctor's appointment, or had. I'm late now." "Is serious?" "Probably." She nodded, processing this. Then, to his amazement, she sat back down and patted the pew beside her. "Sit." "What?" "Sit. You already here. Already in church. Already late for appointment, so sit." He found himself obeying, sliding into the pew beside her. Up close, he could see the exhaustion in her eyes, the strain around her mouth, the way her hands trembled slightly from hunger or cold or both. "I give you 1 week to move out," he said suddenly. "That's not right. You pay what you can. You try to find work. I see you try. I'm sorry for what I said yesterday, for how I said it, for making spectacle of your struggle." She was quiet for a moment, then, "You think I accept apology just like that? After you humiliate me? After you insult my faith, my people, everything I am?" "No, Good, because I don't accept." She turned to look at him directly. "Not yet. First you tell me why. Why so angry? Why so cruel? What happened to you that make you need to hurt others?" The question hung in the air like incense, heavy and transforming. Victor found himself talking, the words pouring out like water through a broken dam. He told her about Elena, about their dreams, about the cancer that ate her from the inside out while he watched helplessly. He told her about the funeral, where only 7 people came, about the nights he sat in their apartment listening to her music box play until the spring broke. He told her about the slow calcification of his heart, the way grief had turned to anger and anger to cruelty, because hurting others was easier than feeling his own pain. And now, he finished, now I'm probably dying too, and I realize I've become everything I once hated, a man who profits from others' misery, a man who takes pleasure in power over the weak, a man who... He stopped, unable to continue. A man who follows immigrant girls to church because he's hungry for something he cannot name, Miriam finished for him. He nodded, ashamed. She was quiet for a long time. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out the pressed flower. She must have retrieved it from where he'd left it in the hallway. "You read my letter?" "Yes, I'm sorry. This is lavender from my grandmother's garden. She is 93 years old. Survive Stalin, survive Hitler, survive communists, survive poverty you cannot imagine. You know what she tell me before I leave? She say, 'Miriam, America will test you. Not test your English or your skills or your strength. Will test your soul. Will show you who you really are. Some people, when tested, they become hard like stone. Others, they become soft like bread. Be bread, little one. Be bread that can feed others, not stone that breaks teeth.'" And she pressed the flower into his hand. "I'm very angry with you, Mr. Petrov. What you say to me, how you treat me, is wrong, is cruel. But I see now you already punishing yourself more than I ever could. You already in prison of your own making. So I do what my grandmother would do. I give you flower from her garden. I give you forgiveness you don't deserve, not because you earn it, but because I choose not to be stone." Victor stared at the small purple flower in his palm, this gift that had traveled thousands of miles to end up here, in this moment, in this church, where he had no right to be. He thought of all the rent money in his safe, all the security it represented, all the nothing it actually meant. "The building," he said suddenly. "I'm leaving you the building." "What? When I die? I don't have anyone else. No family, no friends, no one. Just tenants who fear me and probably celebrate when I'm gone. But you just gave me the only kindness I've received in 15 years. So I'm leaving you the building. All of it." Miriam shook her head. "You not dying tomorrow. Doctor not even tell you what wrong yet. Doesn't matter. Even if I live another 20 years, what else am I going to do with it? Give it to the state, let it rot. At least with you, it might become what Elena and I once dreamed, a place where people like you, people who come here with nothing but hope, might find shelter while they build their dreams. I cannot accept this. You accepted $43 from me yesterday, everything you had. So now I give you everything I have. Fair trade." She stared at him, this man who had humiliated her 24 hours ago, now offering her a fortune she couldn't comprehend. "You serious? Go to lawyer tomorrow. Make it legal. Until then..." He reached into his pocket and pulled out his keyring, working off a single key. "This is master key. Opens every apartment, including mine. You're the super now, the building manager. I'll pay you salary. Fair salary, not charity. You collect rents, handle repairs, manage everything. I'll still own it until I don't. But you run it." The key sat between them on the pew like a tiny miracle, catching the colored light from the stained glass windows. "Why?" she whispered. "Because you prayed for me. Even after everything, you prayed for me. Do you understand what that means? To someone who believes in nothing, who has spent 15 years convinced that the universe is empty and cold and meaningless? You prayed for me. Your grandmother is praying for you. There's a chain of prayer stretching across the world, across generations, and somehow I got caught in it. And maybe that's enough. Maybe that's everything." Miriam picked up the key slowly, as if it might evaporate. "I don't know anything about managing building. You'll learn. You're smart. And unlike me, you actually care about the people living there. She turned the key over in her hands, this small piece of metal that represented such an enormous change in her fortune. Then she said something that surprised them both. "Come with me." "Where?" "To lunch. Church serves free lunch on Wednesdays." "Is Wednesday?" "I don't belong." "Nobody belongs until they do. Come." The church basement was full of people who looked like they had stories. Veterans with haunted eyes, elderly people counting pennies, immigrants like Miriam trying to stretch dollars into dreams. Victor stood in line feeling conspicuous in his expensive clothes, but nobody seemed to care. They were too focused on their own struggles to judge his. The food was simple: soup, bread, fruit. But sitting across from Miriam, watching her bow her head in brief prayer before eating, Victor thought it might be the most important meal of his life. "Tell me about your family," he said. So she did. She told him about her parents, who worked in a textile factory that paid barely enough to survive, about her younger brother, who was brilliant but couldn't afford university, about her grandmother, the keeper of stories and prayers and pressed flowers. She talked about Moldova, about its beauty and its poverty, about leaving everything you love for the chance at something better. "And now," she said, "I can help them. With salary from building job, I can send money home, can bring my brother here maybe, for school, can—" She stopped, overwhelmed by the sudden reversal of her fortune. "The doctor," Victor said suddenly. "I should go. Find out what's wrong. I come with you. You don't need to. You came to church with me. I come to doctor with you. Fair trade." The doctor's office was sterile and white, everything the church had not been. They sat in waiting room chairs designed to be uncomfortable, surrounded by year-old magazines and the quiet desperation of people waiting for bad news. When they called Victor's name, Miriam stood with him. "Family only," the nurse said. "She is family," Victor replied, surprising himself with how easily the lie came and how much it felt like truth. The doctor was young, earnest, careful with his words. The tests showed anomalies. Could be nothing, could be something. More tests needed. Blood work, scans, specialists. The words washed over Victor like white noise, but Miriam listened carefully, asked questions, took notes in her careful handwriting. Outside afterward, Victor felt dizzy with anticlimax. "All that fear for we don't know yet. But now you find out," Miriam said. "Do tests, get answers, get treatment if needed." "With what?" "My insurance barely covers anything. The tests alone will cost thousands." She held up the master key. "Building has 12 units. All pay rent is enough. That money is for what? For sitting in bank? For counting alone at night? Money is tool, Mr. Petrov. Like hammer or screwdriver, only good if you use it for something. You use it to find out if you okay. Then, if you not okay, you use it to get better." They stood on the sidewalk, two unlikely companions brought together by cruelty and redeemed by grace. The rain had stopped, and weak sunlight was breaking through the clouds, making the wet streets shine like they were paved with silver. "I don't deserve your kindness," Victor said. "Nobody deserves kindness. That's why it's gift, not payment." That night, Victor couldn't sleep again. But this time it wasn't from fear or regret. It was from something he hadn't felt in so long he'd forgotten its name: hope. He walked through his apartment, turning Elena's pictures face up again, opening windows that had been closed for years, letting air and life back into his tomb of grief. At 3 in the morning, his phone rang. "Miriam." "Mr. Petrov, sorry to wake you, but Mrs. Chen fell. She okay but scared. Can you come?" He threw on clothes and rushed downstairs. Mrs. Chen's apartment was full of people: Miriam, the Ramirez family, Mr. Thompson, all the neighbors who had witnessed Miriam's humiliation now gathered in concern. Mrs. Chen was on her couch, her ankle wrapped, protesting in Mandarin that she was fine. Everyone should go home. "She needs hospital," Miriam said, but she refused. "No insurance." "I'll pay," Victor said immediately. "Call ambulance." As they waited for the paramedics, Victor looked around the room at these people he had terrorized for years, who were now looking at him with confusion and tentative hope. The Ramirez children peeked at him from behind their mother's skirt. Mr. Thompson offered him coffee from his thermos. "You different," Mrs. Chen said to him in her careful English. "What happened?" Victor looked at Miriam, who was holding Mrs. Chen's hand and speaking to her softly in a mixture of English and gestures. "I remembered how to be human," he said. The next weeks passed in a blur of changes. Victor saw specialists who confirmed what he had suspected. Cancer, but early stage, treatable. The treatments would be brutal but survivable. Miriam organized a schedule where tenants took turns taking him to chemotherapy, bringing him food, sitting with him through the worst of it. The building began to transform too. Miriam convinced Victor to use some of his hoarded money for repairs, fixing the heating, patching the walls, replacing broken windows. The tenants, no longer afraid, began to help. Mr. Thompson turned out to be a retired electrician. Mr. Ramirez was a painter. They worked together, creating something beautiful out of what had been neglected. Miriam found a job at a non-profit that helped resettle refugees, her own experience making her perfect for the role. She still managed the building in the evenings and weekends, but now she had proper work too, meaningful work, work that used her languages and her compassion and her understanding of what it meant to be a stranger in a strange land. One evening, 6 months after that day in the hallway, Victor and Miriam sat in his apartment, now their regular Tuesday dinner, where she cooked Moldovan food, and he told stories about Elena, and she talked about her day at work. His hair was gone from the chemo, but the latest scans showed the treatment was working. "I have something for you," she said, pulling out an envelope. Inside were photographs from Moldova. Her family standing in front of a new house, modest but sturdy. Her brother at university in Chisinau, her grandmother in her garden surrounded by lavender. "The money I save from salary and job, I send home. They build house, brother start school, all because you give me chance. All because you gave me forgiveness I didn't deserve." She smiled, that rare, transformative smile that made her whole face light up. "My grandmother says something in last letter. She say kindness is like seeds. You plant them without knowing what will grow. Sometimes nothing, sometimes weeds. But sometimes, if soil is ready, even if soil seems dead and bitter, sometimes grows whole garden." Victor thought about the building, no longer grey and cold, but warm and alive with community. He thought about Mrs. Chen, recovered and teaching Miriam to make dumplings. He thought about the Ramirez children, who now ran to greet him instead of hiding. He thought about his cancer, retreating under the assault of chemicals and care. "Your grandmother is wise. She pray for you every day. She say man who gave her granddaughter home is man worth praying for. I didn't give you a home. I gave you a building. You made it a home for all of us." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the city, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. Somewhere in Moldova, an old woman knelt in a garden of lavender, praying for strangers she would never meet, but loved anyway. Somewhere in the building, families were gathering for dinner, children were doing homework. Life was happening in all its ordinary glory. "Mr. Petrov," Miriam said. "Victor, please, we're friends now, aren't we?" "Victor." She tested the name, smiled. "I need to tell you something. The lawyer, he say papers are ready. For building, when time comes. But I make decision. I don't want building for myself. I want to make it, how you say, cooperative, where all tenants own together. Everyone who lives here has share. That way, no one can ever be thrown out just for being poor. Everyone belongs." Victor felt tears in his eyes. When had he become someone who cried so easily? Elena would have loved that. It's what she always wanted. "Then we name it after her. Elena House. Place where strangers become family." That night, after Miriam left, Victor stood at his window looking down at the street. But now, instead of seeing ants, he saw people, each with their own stories, struggles, dreams. He saw teenagers rushing home before curfew, elderly couples walking slowly hand in hand, young mothers pushing strollers, immigrants like Miriam heading to night shifts or English classes or home to apartments where they were learning to build new lives from the rubble of old ones. His phone buzzed, a text from Miriam. "Grandmother send new pressed flower for you. Forget-me-not. She say to tell you that man who learns to love again is never truly sick, no matter what body does. Sleep well, Victor. Tomorrow we paint lobby." Victor held his phone, this message from across the world, this blessing from a woman who had every reason to curse him, but chose to bless instead. He thought about Miriam's question in the church all those months ago. Why so cruel? The answer had been simple. He was cruel because he was afraid. And he was afraid because he had forgotten how to hope. But hope, it turned out, was like those pressed flowers. Fragile, yes, but also remarkably persistent. It could survive being crushed, could travel thousands of miles, could bloom again in the most unlikely soil. The lobby painting day arrived grey and cold, but the building was warm with activity. Everyone showed up, even Mrs. Chen with her walker, insisting she could at least supervise. They had chosen a soft yellow, the color of sunrise, of new beginnings. As Victor picked up his brush, his hands still shaky from the latest round of chemo, he felt Miriam's hand on his shoulder. "We do this together," she said. And they did. Stroke by stroke, they covered the old grey walls with light. The children painted handprints along the bottom, a rainbow of small hands reaching upward. Mrs. Chen taught everyone to write welcome in their various languages. Bienvenidos, dobro požalovat, hoş geldiniz, huan ying, maligayang pagdating, creating a border near the ceiling. As they worked, Miriam sang hymns from her childhood, folk songs from Moldova, even some American songs she was learning. Others joined in when they knew the words, creating a multilingual chorus that echoed through the halls. Victor found himself humming along, remembering songs Elena used to sing while they worked on the building in those early, hopeful days. "You know," Mr. Thompson said, painting beside him, "I've lived here 12 years. This is the first time it's felt like home." That evening, exhausted and paint-splattered, they all sat in the lobby admiring their work. Someone had brought a hot plate and made coffee. Someone else had brought cookies. The Ramirez children were already drawing plans for a mural in the hallway. "Speech!" someone called out. "Victor, give speech!" He stood slowly, looking at these people who had become his family when he had thought family was lost to him forever. "I don't have words," he began, except thank you, and I'm sorry. And he stopped, overwhelmed. Miriam stood beside him. "Victor, trying to say that we all here for reason. Maybe reason we don't choose, maybe reason we don't understand at first, but here we are, different countries, different languages, different faiths or no faith, but all under same roof, all painting same walls, all making same home. To Elena House," Mr. Ramirez raised his coffee cup. "To Elena House," everyone echoed. Later, as people drifted back to their apartments, Miriam and Victor stood alone in the transformed lobby. The yellow walls seemed to glow in the evening light, and the welcome messages in various languages looked like a promise, or maybe a prayer. "She would have loved this," Victor said. "She does love it," Miriam corrected. "Love doesn't die, Victor. It just changes shape, like water becomes ice or steam, but is still water. Elena's love is in these walls now, in this community, in the choice you made to change." Victor thought about this, how love could transform, how grace could resurrect, how forgiveness could turn crucifixion into resurrection, death into life, endings into beginnings. His phone rang. The doctor. "Mr. Petrov, I have your latest results. The tumors have shrunk by 60%. If this continues, we might be looking at full remission." After he hung up, he told Miriam the news. She didn't seem surprised. Grandmother always say healing comes in many forms. Medicine heals body, but community heals soul. and soul healing makes bodies stronger for fighting. Your grandmother should be a doctor. She is doctor, just different kind." They stood there as darkness fell outside, but light remained within. Somewhere in Moldova, an old woman tended her lavender garden, her prayers crossing oceans like seeds on the wind. Somewhere in the building, Mrs. Chen was teaching the Ramirez children to play mahjong. Somewhere, Mr. Thompson was fixing a neighbor's leaky faucet without being asked. "You know what I realized," Victor said. "That day when I shamed you in the hallway, I thought I was showing everyone your weakness, but really I was revealing my own. And when you gave me that $43, when you gave me everything you had, you weren't showing weakness either. You were showing strength I didn't know existed." "Strength is easy when you have nothing to lose," Miriam said. "But you had everything to lose. Money, pride, control, and you chose to give it up. That's real courage." A knock at the door interrupted them. A young woman stood there, hollow-eyed and thin, holding a baby and a worn suitcase. "Please," she said in accented English, "I looking for room. I have little money, but I work, I clean, I cook, anything, please." Victor and Miriam exchanged glances. There was one vacant unit, 2C, but it needed work. "Where are you from?" Miriam asked gently. "Syria, through Turkey, then Mexico, now here. My husband, he didn't make it." Without hesitation, Victor pulled out his keys. 2C, second floor. It needs paint and the heat is temperamental, but it's yours. How much? Whatever you can pay when you find work. For now, just rest." The woman's eyes filled with tears. "Why? Why you help?" Miriam put her arm around the woman's shoulders. "Because once, someone helped us. Come, I show you the room, and tomorrow we paint it together, yellow like sunrise." As they walked up the stairs, Victor heard Miriam say, "What's your name?" "Amira. Beautiful name. Means princess, yes? I'm Miriam. This is your home now, Amira. You are safe." Victor stood in his transformed lobby, in his transformed life, thinking about transformations. Water into wine, death into life, cruelty into kindness, strangers into family. He pulled out his phone and texted Miriam, "We need more yellow paint." Her response came quickly. "Already ordered. Grandmother says to tell you yellow is color of hope." Hope. Such a small word for such a large thing. Hope that had traveled from a garden in Moldova to a hallway in America. Hope that had survived humiliation and sickness and all the casual cruelties that humans inflict on each other. Hope that could transform a bitter landlord and a desperate immigrant into something neither could have imagined. Family. The next morning, Victor woke to the sound of singing. Amira's baby was crying, and she was singing it a lullaby in Arabic. The melody drifted through the old walls like a blessing. He made coffee and walked downstairs to find Miriam already in 2C with paint supplies, and half the building there to help. "You're supposed to be at work," he told her. "I took day off. Told them I have family emergency. This isn't—" "Of course it is. New family member needs help. That's emergency." As they painted, Amira told her story. The bombing, the escape, the camps, the journey that had taken 2 years and cost everything. The baby, born in a detention center in Mexico, the husband who had died of untreated diabetes just miles from the border. It was a story of such loss that even breathing seemed like an act of courage. "But I'm here," she finished. "My daughter is here. We are alive. That's enough to start." "More than enough," Victor said, thinking of his own journey from death to life, from isolation to community. "It's everything." That afternoon, while the paint dried, they all sat in the lobby eating soup that Mrs. Chen had made. Amira's baby lay sleeping in Miriam's arms. The Ramirez children were teaching Amira basic English words, pointing to objects and saying their names slowly, patiently. Victor's phone buzzed. Another text from the doctor. They wanted him to speak at a cancer support group to share his story of recovery. "What would I say?" he asked Miriam. "The truth, that healing isn't just about medicine. It's about finding reasons to live. about discovering that even when you think your heart is dead, it can learn to beat again. That evening, as the sun set through the windows of Elena House, Victor stood in his apartment, looking at the photograph of his wife he had finally hung back on the wall. In the picture, she was laughing, paintbrush in hand, standing in this very building when they had first bought it, young, hopeful, alive with dreams. "We did it, Elena," he whispered. "Not the way we planned, and it took me too long, but we did it. This place is what you wanted it to be, a home for people who need one." A knock at his door. Miriam entered with an envelope. "From grandmother," she said. Inside was another pressed flower, this time a daisy, and a note in carefully translated English. "For Victor. Daisy means new beginnings. Thank you for giving my granddaughter not just home, but purpose. Thank you for becoming the man you were always meant to be. I pray for you not because you need it now, but because prayer is how we celebrate miracles. You are miracle. Building is miracle. Second chances are always miracles." That night, unable to sleep but not from pain or fear, Victor walked through his building. In 2C, Amira was singing again. In 3B, Miriam was video calling her family in Moldova, showing them the building she now helped manage. In 4A, the teenagers were doing homework together. In the basement, Mr. Thompson had set up a workshop where he was teaching the older kids basic repairs. This was what resurrection looked like. Not dramatic, not instantaneous, but slow and daily and communal. It looked like yellow paint and shared soup and lullabies in multiple languages. It looked like former enemies becoming family, like pressed flowers traveling across oceans, like Grace showing up disguised as an immigrant girl with $43 and faith that could move mountains, or at least transform bitter landlords. Victor climbed to the roof, something he hadn't done in years. The city spread out before him, lights twinkling like ground-level stars. Somewhere out there were other Miriams, other Amiras, other people carrying nothing but hope and meeting nothing but closed doors. But here, in this one building, doors were opening, hearts were opening, lives were being saved in ways that had nothing to do with medicine and everything to do with that ancient technology of transformation. Love. His phone rang. "Miriam. Victor. You okay? Saw your light on. I'm on the roof." "Don't jump," she was joking, but he heard the thread of real concern. "Come up, bring tea." Minutes later, she appeared with 2 steaming cups and a blanket. They sat on the old ventilation unit, looking out at the city, sharing comfortable silence. "I've been thinking," Victor said, "about that first day, when you said you'd pray for me. I laughed, but you did it anyway. Why? Because prayer isn't about the person you pray for believing. It's about the person praying believing. Believing that change is possible, that grace exists, that love is stronger than hate. When I prayed for you, I was really praying for myself. To have strength to forgive, to see you as more than just cruel man, to believe that this story could end differently than it began. And it did." "Is not ended yet," Miriam said. "Stories like ours don't end. They just keep going, adding more chapters, more characters. Tomorrow, someone new will knock on door needing home. Next week, you have another treatment. Next month, my brother comes to visit. Story continues." They sat there until dawn began to lighten the eastern sky, painting the clouds in shades of rose and gold. The city below began to wake, delivery trucks rumbling, birds singing, life resuming its ancient rhythms. "Thank you," Victor said. "For what?" "For seeing me when I couldn't see myself. For believing I could change when I had forgotten change was possible. For giving me what I didn't deserve." "Grace," Miriam said. "The word you're looking for is grace." As the sun rose fully, bathing Elena House in light, Victor thought about grace, how it could arrive in the most unexpected forms, speak in accented English, carry a worn Bible and $43, how it could transform a hallway confrontation into a resurrection story, a humiliation into a healing, an ending into a beginning. Downstairs, Amira's baby began crying again, and Amira began singing. Mrs. Chen's door opened, and she shuffled out to start her morning exercises. The Ramirez children thundered down the stairs, late for school as always. Mr. Thompson's coffee maker gurgled to life. Elena House was waking up, and Victor was alive to see it, to be part of it, to belong to it. The master key that had once been his symbol of power now hung from Miriam's keychain, transformed into a symbol of service. The building that had been his prison had become his salvation. The strangers he had terrorized had become the family he had thought he'd never have again. "We should go down," Miriam said. "Amira needs help with baby while she goes to social services for papers." "We?" "Yes, we. You're good with baby. She likes you." "How can you tell?" "She stops crying when you hold her. Babies know things. They see hearts, not faces." As they walked back down to life, to community, to the ordinary miracle of Elena House, Victor thought about Miriam's grandmother, tending her lavender in Moldova, sending prayers and pressed flowers across the world. He thought about chains of grace, how one act of kindness could ripple outward in ways never imagined. At the door to Amira's apartment, Miriam paused. "Victor, that day in hallway when you shamed me, I wanted to disappear. I wanted to give up, go back to Moldova, admit failure. But then I remembered something my grandmother said: the darkest moment is not the end of story. It's the beginning of the part where light comes." She knocked, and Amira opened the door, her baby reaching out arms to Victor with a drooly smile. "See," Miriam said, "light comes." And it did. Not all at once, not without struggle, but steadily, daily, in the form of shared meals and painted walls and helping hands and pressed flowers and prayers that crossed oceans. In the form of grace that could transform the worst of us into something better, that could turn a building into a home, strangers into family, endings into beginnings. The story of Elena House continued, as Miriam had said it would, adding new chapters with each passing day. Victor's cancer went into full remission. Miriam's brother arrived and enrolled in university. Amira found work and began to rebuild her life. Mrs. Chen taught everyone Tai Chi in the lobby. The Ramirez children painted their mural, a tree with roots in many soils, but branches reaching toward the same sky. And in Moldova, an old woman tended her garden, her prayers rising like incense, her pressed flowers carrying messages of hope across impossible distances, her faith in the power of transformation, proving again and again to be stronger than any force that would seek to destroy it.